Добрый день всем.
Okay, good afternoon. My presentation is called How to Protect Your Open Source Projects on GitHub from Sanctions. And traditionally, the QR code of our community, where you can find like-minded people. I'm Alexander Popov. I'm a development of Linux kernel from 2012, and I'm a researcher in cybersecurity at Positive Technologies, where I search for vulnerabilities and exploits and research in methods of self-securing the kernel. I presented at many conferences, but I'm here today with a little bit of a non-typical presentation. Normally I talk about vulnerabilities and exploits and the outcomes of my research, but now I will share with you the findings of my quite lengthy work, but not because those results are sexy, but because you can reuse them and address the topic that I want to highlight today. And the problem is that open source projects at GitHub are not very well protected. And I will share with you which solutions I tried and which solution I believe could do it. And by the way, a crayon AI helped me generate a metaphor for today's presentation. The white ship is where all of us are, and I'm preparing a rescue raft, but there's a storm approaching. So that is the metaphor for my presentation today. I will try to be as straightforward as I can. Okay, GitHub and what the problem is about. The main thing that keeps us tied to it is that GitHub brings together more than 100 million developers. That's a huge audience that helps us promote our project and find like-minded people. And many open source projects, there's no surprise that are developed there. Almost every developer in the world has a GitHub account. Starting from 2018, Microsoft owns this platform and implements a policy of sanctions and blockings that we come across. We see examples, and most recently is the blocking of accounts of employees of the Yadro company, with their repositories being frozen, including a very important utility called IPMI tool. It's a utility for working with SBMC. That's an open source project that solves a lot of issues with various vendors, but even that didn't prevent GitHub from essentially paralyzing this project. And I have my personal projects at GitHub. This is my personal account. These are my personal projects, and I know that
for personal use.
So the most meaningful my Linux kernel security projects are the Linux kernel defense map and a tool that helps inspect the kernel for security options. I'll say a few words about them. These projects are implemented in the supply chain and the operation cycle of many GNU Linux distributives. A few words about Linux kernel defense map. That's a mind map that shows links between the following entities: types of vulnerabilities in the kernel, possible exploits, exploit primitives or tricks, and protection tools, defense tools. Some in upstream, some separately from kernel, other that are hardware dependent. And there's a variety of those. Here I I'm showing just a piece of the map, but the map is huge, as you can see. The map is quite a successful project at GitHub. It has quite a broad audience, and there are ways to assess that. Here you can see the distribution of people that follow the project, follow updates by countries and by companies, the people who are interested. So that's a certain audience that you don't want to lose if you were to be blocked. The second project is a tool which is called kconfig hardened check. And that's a tool that is used to check Linux kernel settings options that affect security, and there's more than 200 of those. So that's a compliance tool, how to safely configure your kernel. The settings are of three types: the options with which you compile the kernel, the options with which you loaded the kernel command line, and options that you can adjust in runtime with syscontrol. So all those settings that you saw in the previous map, this tool can inspect those and give you a diagnosis. This kernel, with these settings, what security does it provide for your information system? And here's an overview of this tool. Four architectures are supported: x86, x8632, ARM64, and ARM. And the tool can check the compilation options, the command line options, and the real-time options. It fits into your continuous development pipeline. It can return JSON results that you can reuse in other tools. This is quite a successful project. There are contributors. There are people who actively participate. There are people who represent major Linux distributives, Canonical, XOS, Arch, etc. The tool has a certain release policy. The releases are reused by GNU Linux distributives, and it's provided as a release, as part of a release pack. Also, a map of interested users, and by countries and by companies. You can see that the universe here is more consisting of cybersecurity companies. So what do? There is this problem of the account being blocked. It's like we build a house on someone else's territory, and we may face the consequences at any given moment. The easiest way would be to just stand up and walk away, but then you would lose the audience that exists around this project, and you lose your connections to the open source community, to GNU Linux distributives, other products that reuse your products in their delivery chain. Staying as it is an option, but that means losing it all if you are blocked. And a good case in point is the IPMI tool. So what's to be done? I started thinking about it last year, and I thought that you want to be on somebody else's territory, but to prepare for an emergency, and that is to mirror your project. And I want to share with you the tools and approaches that you could, whereby you could reuse this. Well, even previously, I mirrored my GitHub projects in GitLab, and it has a nice function, pull mirroring, which copies your information from GitHub to GitLab, and it copies the code, the tags, your project releases, and importantly, all discussions in issues and pull requests, all the community, all the noise around your project is copied as well. This is a nice function. I've been using it for about a year, but then I noticed that suddenly my GitLab mirrors started to lag behind my master repositories. Why? And I logged onto GitLab and I saw this banner that your project is no longer receiving GitLab Ultimate benefits. So essentially, they closed access to this feature, but you can apply to the GitLab for open source program. Let's check what that program is. And this is the form that you would fill in when you apply for GitLab open source. To be able to use in your open source project the features, including GitLab mirroring, that were provided previously to all open source projects. Now you have to confirm that you're not seeking any financial benefits in this project altogether. So you sort of drop all the rights to that. But there's a good phrase at the end that all GitLab products must comply with United States export control and economic sanction laws. Thanks, not for me. I will abstain. So, pull mirroring is turned off in a standard account. You can apply for a standard for a premium tier account, but Russian developers are not allowed to buy it, and even using a trial of this premium tier is not allowed for Russian developers. So I saw that this is an unfriendly platform suddenly, and I don't want having a mirror there to hedge myself against the risks. Doesn't make sense. I started looking for other solutions, and of course what comes to mind is a separate server. You can pull up, fire up your own server. There are things like Git, which is now called Forgeho, or GitLab CE, that you can fire up locally and to continue your development independently. But that doesn't work for me because it doesn't solve my main task. That limits interaction with the community, and that would limit contributions by others. So I don't want to have it all to myself. It's not what I want. And I started looking for other solutions. I looked at China's Git, but the support of English localization is so weak that it's not for me. You switch into English, you go to another page, and then you are in Chinese language text again. Bitbucket. Atlassian. But it cannot import information from discussion threads, from issues and pull requests. You would only get a fetch of your code, and that's it. That's not very useful. And then Atlassian left Russia. Okay, all the best to you. Next is Radical peering network, P2P network. It has powerful features based on blockchain. So that's a P2P software development platform, but I thought that Radical is too radical for me. Not at this point. Source Hut, another interesting platform, but it's only available for a fee, and we can't use Russian-issued cards to pay. And then the flow is incompatible with GitHub. It's similar to Linux. It's all email-driven. All events in the repository happen as a result of an email. A pull request would be an email, an issue would be an email. And because I need something that would help me just seamlessly mirror what is available at GitHub, I thought that it doesn't work for me. And then I was prompted by a developer community. I went to a server called Salsa. That's a GitLab CE community edition that Debian created for their software. And I created an account, and it was supposed to be approved by the administrators of the server, and they did that. But it turned out that at this GitLab, similar to the main GitLab, pull mirroring is disabled. Then I started at a Russian platform called GitFlick. And here are my main impressions from the experience of using it. The good thing is that it has the feature of schedule-based mirroring of your codes. You do git fetch and git pull. So your GitFlick thread is synchronized with GitHub thread. But public repositories can only be created only when you write to support, which is strange for a small platform. And in fact, a public repository is or became available only a month ago, provided that you confirm your account through Yandex or VK. So you have to report your mobile phone number. Okay, I addressed that through support, but what is lacking is that there is no information copying from issues and pull requests from GitHub. There's no CI. The platform code is proprietary. And as I used the platform, I came across many errors and bugs, and I thought, okay, I want to support the local producer. And I reported to them, but the typical response that I was getting to those bugs was that we'll certainly sort it out sometimes later. But currently, we have other tasks. Okay, if you have tasks, okay, I get it. So that was my take on GitFlick. You have a GitHub, there's a thread there, you do push, there's CI that implements continuous integration for every push into the repository. And so you do initial migration into GitFlick, and then it does regular mirroring. But as I said, empty threads, no issues, no pull requests, no CI. Essentially, that is just a public Git repository that is updated from your main Git repository. And that doesn't solve my problem. Then I found another solution, Codeberg platform. The servers on which it works are supported by an NPO, non-for-profit organization in Germany. So, and these are adepts of free Libra open source software, of course. And it has an audience, not like GitHub, but some 50,000 developers who, by the way, migrated out of GitHub for some personal reasons. And it's not just open source, it's free software. It's based on 4GO or Gitty. It supports copying of all information from issues and pull requests. That is great. And what's more, Codeberg has an integration with open source CI, which is called Woodpecker CI. Nice name, by the way. So that's a fully open solution, and I will talk about it later, but in March 2020 they turned off the mirroring function. You will recall that at GitHub at the time there was a debate about a co-pilot, which is an ML learning, which is an ML model that's learned on open source projects, but then it could write proprietary code. So question was about license purity here. So many then moved from GitHub to Codeberg, and the Codeberg servers were not able to digest this traffic. So they said, okay, it's easy to make a mirror, but we'll have to maintain that for an indefinite time. And so they turned off this mirroring function, sadly. This is how mirroring would look at Codeberg. There's the initial repository. First, you import the repository into Codeberg with all the up-to-date information. But as I said, there's no pull mirroring. So those updates would not make it to Codeberg. And essentially there you would have old issues, old pull requests, old discussion threads. And it's quite unfortunate that it's not a complete solution. But what do we do with out-of-date information in issues and pull requests? You might delete the project and then re-import, but that's not a good solution. It's more of a crutch. I didn't want to do that. I decided to look for other ways. How do I preserve the knowledge that the community created in my main repository? And my first solution was to turn this knowledge into code and to commit this into a repository. Quite a logical thing. And I found a project which is called GH2MD, which is GitHub to Markdown, which helps download all the discussion threads into a Markdown document. And then you can commit it. Under the hood, it uses a GraphQL interface. GitHub provides this interface for you to develop services integrated with GitHub. And to work with GitHub, you have to create a personal access token. And I created a token at public access at the very lowest privilege level, and that was enough to pull all the information, convert it to a Markdown document, and to make the discussion around the project as part of the code. I was prompted that there's another tool that does a similar thing, which is called Gitbug. Interestingly, they import the issues and pull requests from the repository and convert it into data within the Git repository. And there's a special interface through which you can, even without going online, without connecting to the server, you can work with issues in your projects in Git. That's a great solution. But I thought that having a Markdown version of the discussion threads would be okay. That was my first solution. Okay, you have a backup of your discussion thread. But what can be done for a more seamless integration? Then I found another solution. It turns out that in Codeberg, you can turn on an external issue tracker. And for that, you want to set the format of a link to the issue in the main repository. And now in Codeberg, I click on a particular issue, I would be automatically redirected into the necessary page on GitHub. And this is convenient. So I have both a backup and a seamless seamless link. But pull requests are turned off. Here's the schedule of mirroring. From GitHub, there's initial migration. The issue tracker is then turned off. So, as you click on the links, you get on the GitHub, but you also have a backup of all the discussions as part of the code. Good, that's much better. But still, the outstanding issue is continuous integration. In my project, I use GitHub Actions. That's a proprietary solution by GitHub, whereby every event in the repository can be matched with automated actions to check the quality of the code. And I want to make sure that my mirror has full parity with the main repository. And I tried looking for ways to do it. First, a few words about the CI that I use in my kernel safety security tool. There are tools that test various use cases. And the tool has an engine because options can be interdependent. And sometimes you want to do either or conditions, checks. So there's a certain language in which you write those conditions. And for that, I do unit tests that do the same thing. And you can see that functional tests, 98% coverage, other tests, 100% coverage. And with every push to the repository, a functional test is done. Through pip install, the package is installed on your system with all the tests and the coverage is calculated. And unit tests are done using a Python module which is called just like that, unit test. And it would be good to have the same feature in the mirror. As I said, Codeberg has a solution, and the good thing that it has open source code, whereas GitHub Actions are proprietary. But they are different in terms of their philosophy. If GitHub Actions, in GitHub Actions, there's a YML file that describes the actions that have to be fulfilled. And there's a GitHub marketplace from which you can get some functions, such as interaction with code coverage or installation of a certain package, say a Python interpreter. You just get whatever you need, those components into your testing scenario, and it works. In Woodpecker CI, it works in a different way. It's Docker container based. And the features that you need in your tests, you've got to first build your container and then run testing scenarios using that. A different paradigm. But I was able to single out the common parts of my testing. And I just did different trappings. One would run the test in GitHub Actions and the other one in Woodpecker CI. And here's how CI works in Woodpecker CI. There are unit tests, and they calculate coverage. There are functional tests. And all of that is done for every push into the repository. Awesome. So the final diagram of my mirroring looks as follows. There's GitHub with its CI, there's Codeberg with repository copied from GitHub, with all the recent updates in terms of discussion threads around the project, and also continuous integration. So if there is an off-nominal situation, I can count on that and not lose my code. And importantly, because my project is used in the supply chain of other projects, I wrote in my README file that this is the main repository, and these are my mirrors. So if I'm blocked, if something happens to my GitHub account under any pretext, then the users of my components would be able to find me at another platform. That is very important. So, in summary, if for any reason my personal account is blocked, frozen, or whatever, there's a backup plan, there's an evacuation plan. So I recreate my repository in Codeberg. I turn on my task tracker in Codeberg, disconnected from GitHub issues. Then I do a merge request for me to get pull requests from distributors, and I would make an announcement in GNU Linux distributives that from now on, please use this platform to get the most recent releases. And the link to it is already in the project repository. So development would immediately switch to another platform with very little overhead for me.
And with minimum problems to the users of my project. So it's my advice, if you realize that your project is not protected against any kind of voluntary actions of the owners of the platform, think about evacuation, about moving somewhere else to continue in being integrated in the open source community that uses your project. That seems to be all. Thank you very much. I'm ready to answer your questions. Hello, thank you. And you told us about GitFlick. Are there any people there? Yes, there are. But the platform is very small, and there are few people there, and almost all projects do not have any correlations in GitFlip because all discussions are very weak. You cannot see them much in the code in GitFlip, and in the web platform of the project we don't have any discussions at all. Of course, until now, well, I think it will develop in future, but the current state is very weak. That is true. Moreover, I think they lack power, they lack resources, development resources, and if they want to develop, they have to move up if they want to boost the number of users. Hello, the presentation was rather interesting. I'm not competent about sanctions and legal issues. Is there a risk of blocking of your repository in Kotberg? As far as I understand, looking at your screenshots, in GitFlip there is a certain link still, even now. If Kotberg blocks you, will you maintain your GitFlip link in that case? And how to put it better, foreign users, how interested are they in the Russian projects in GitFlip? Or maybe GitFlip will not be available for foreign users politically. This is just a philosophic question, but anything can happen. First of all, first part of your question about Kotberg. We didn't have any precedents of somebody being blocked. No, when various political events took place, even before that, Syria, Iran, they were also under sanctions. Kotberg wrote explicitly that they are not going to support any kind of sanctions because we are a non-profit organization, we are a community platform. That's why a lot of users came to them when GitHub, Microsoft burned GitHub, and there was a scandal about deleting exploits when Microsoft deleted whole repositories. So the platform Kotberg invites people from GitHub. GitFlip, I'm not sure there are any foreign users there, and the platform is really tiny. I'm not sure that they try to become international. There is no British English language interface even. So your contributors will come to your standalone server. But that will be difficult. A person must be registered in your server to send you his request, build and open an account, but still that might be better for international repositories. They have to use Russian language, or they have to open an account with Yandex-based or VK-based phone number. Well, actually, it's just a very tiny little attempt. Alexander, thank you for the presentation. The question is an administrative one. You said that other people should be able to contribute to your product. Did you regard the option of renting VPS in the cloud with a wide IP, launch GitLab Community Edition, rent a domain name for the people to contribute by domain name? That would be a solution with a separate server. Well, you know, it's a different story. Even VPS at a certain at an important platform like DigitalOcean, it's difficult to do it from Russia. It's difficult to pay. Then you have to support the phone number. This is any complex system consisting of many components becomes more fragile, and this solution is not as stable as opening an account at a foreign open source. What about Croc local cloud? It's much like Gitflick, Russian community, a very narrow and close community. What I did when I had a task of choosing out of many alternatives, and each of the alternatives had to be evaluated by many criteria. That was a multi-criteria optimization table with a lot of solutions where you apply weight to each parameter and choose the most applicable solution. If you have a lot of alternatives, each of them has its pros and contras, and many values of different alternatives have different weight to me in my situation. I shared the result of several months of my work, and you can reuse it and see the alternatives, not just to start from scratch, but have some areas that, well, that is a problem anyway. The problem is obvious. Thank you for the presentation. How to evacuate your artifacts. If the project is popular at GitHub, somebody uses the artifacts, you are in pipelines, you are in Ansible playbooks, and you have to take the generics, and not all the people update the versions. Good question. I didn't do it yet. I didn't offer binaries. I install through pip install through setup tools, and that's all. The utility can be collected from exe files, and then you install the binary file on your system. I didn't have a problem of taking binaries, but the question is good. I am going to think about it. Did you think about taking CI from GitHub and Woodpecker? Something like a drone in the cloud that would collect all that and push everything. It looks like Woodpecker, which is integrated in the I/O drone with pre-collected Docker images, which are usually needed in CI. It's a rebuilding of my own Woodpecker. Good idea. One more point. Recently, Kodberg announced that they are going to create a CI solution, one more, their solution, their own solution, identical to GitHub Actions, seamless transfer. But they are not ready yet, and the platform is rather small. Hello. Where are you? Yeah, okay. Your evacuation plan is not yours only, or did you use it? Or I evaluated the risks. I didn't use it, but among the people that I know, we have a lot of examples when a person had problems with their developments, with their projects, and with the customers. Your repository is deleted without any trace in GitHub, or a public archive, frozen archive is made. And if you have a tool where you have to update security from time to time. And in GitHub, there is a public repository with vulnerable action. It's a problem. You cannot even fix the vulnerability. You cannot add your fixes. You cannot even tell the people. You don't have access. It's frozen. If you want to redirect the people, add a canary, add a list of mirrors for them to know it in advance, so that in the frozen repository it would be there. Yes. Thank you for the presentation, a very topical subject. But what about criteria you use? You have three alternatives. Kotberg is the one that there were no precedents. Gitflick is narrow. Codeberg didn't have any precedents before a certain point in time. But where is the guarantee when Codeberg may go along the same way? Gitflick is small. Why not raising your own GitLab and save your community? It's better to use your own infrastructure and which you are responsible for. Why did you reject this option? Good question. Perhaps one of the criteria for me is labor intensity. Now, by building a mirror, a reserve copy, I didn't do anything. I didn't apply any efforts. Now you can do anything through Codeberg. And my evacuation plan is possible. In order to eliminate the risks, I could make my own standalone server, but I had to pay for that. I need to host the server, to update the server, because it's public, it's in the internet, it's a multi-component system that has to be updated on a regular basis. Security fixes, security patches. It's my efforts that I have to spend or waste against Codeberg risks, which are hypothetical. GitHub, it's true, but Codeberg, what is the probability of Codeberg blocking me? And I'm not ready to pay for that low probability. So this is my logic now. I have a lot of other projects and I don't have to waste more time for raising my own server. I'm not ready to invest a lot of time and effort. So the risk in Codeberg is not that high for me to spend so much time and effort. This is my answer. So the standalone server is the solution of the problem. Codeberg is a delay, and you just accept the risk, which is low, right? In my own server, I have 0 community. In Codeberg, I have 50,000 community. Right now, at this point, Codeberg is better for me. Less time, less money, and good community. In my own server, I have 0 guaranteed, 0 community. You are quite right. You're absolutely right. I took that decision and I share my opinion, but you can take a different solution. It's not a GitLab. Codeberg is free software with a functionality comparable to GitHub. If I raise my own server, I don't like GitLab. Thank you again. And the question is about backups of trackers. How do you do it? You use a utility in GitHub. Have you got a similar utility in Codeberg? Backupping of your trackers. In GitHub, it's not utility, it's a separate open source project to copy your code. I just made a clone and launched that utility. It's an open source solution which doesn't depend on GitHub. You can use it anywhere for any repository in GitHub. Oh, I got your question. Yes. Is there a utility to do the same in Codeberg? I got you now. Well, I didn't think that way. Good question. From GitHub, the information is taken from that GraphQL interface. I'm not sure. Well, I know the answer. Look, Codeberg uses Forgio. If you make your own server, you can migrate completely all information to your own server. So it's about the previous question too. If in Codeberg, for a certain reason, I see that the situation becomes worse, I raise my own server, Forgio server, and I get a complete clone for that. I don't need even a utility. I just move to my own server because it's the same open source project. So transition to my standalone server can be very quick and seamless. Excellent question. But it wouldn't be GitLab. It would be Codeberg. Yes, Forgio. Let me add to the previous questions. Of course, your own standalone server reduces risks, and can we use an interim solution? Make a link and redirect, make your own server, and a link to redirect to the, so it's my repository on my server, and a redirect. You control that server, and if you are frozen anywhere, at Codeberg, for instance, I don't believe it, but if, then you wouldn't need anything else. You will be able to have your proxy domain controlled by you, almost free. Good, right, excellent idea, by the way. If in my list of mirrors there is a non-controlled object in unfriendly territory, then of course I need to put here my own resource where I can direct community to my project. Thank you very much indeed. Hi, thank you. I see that all these solutions are preventive ones. You try to prevent something which hasn't happened yet. We have a community, and there were cases of blocking. Have you analyzed the blocking cases, the cases of blocking, to define a vector of activities, how to administer GitHub to ensure relations with the community? Are there any general recommendations to avoid blocking, to conceal information about interaction with the companies who are under sanctions? The problem is that even a person who is blocked due to some reason cannot get any information from GitHub about why you are blocked. I know how the way it happens. You get a message that access is limited. You have several days to make a clone. After that, everything will be deleted. When you ask why, what is the reason? What on earth you didn't like? They don't answer. And people try to use social engineering through GitHub employees, try to solve that problem. But this information is not provided even to people who are blocked. Then, if you disagree, GitHub offers you to send a scan of your passport and go to the court of law. So the process is difficult. It's difficult to get information, it's difficult to resist. We looked at different cases, different situations, and still we don't know the true reason. Whether there are people who try to analyze the keywords, or is there an automatic algorithm? Unfortunately, I have some ideas, but these are just my guesses. What did I do? As I showed to you, at the very beginning, I wrote you that this is my personal account, my personal project. Maybe it affected them, maybe not. This is a big platform which belongs to a different jurisdiction, and they are not obliged, they shouldn't report to you. There was one more question, I think. Please raise your hand. Yes, please. Oh, time. Oh, it's time. Maybe last question and that will be all. The blocking, what about code replacement? For example, when GitHub can, I don't know, can replace your code, substitute it for another one. Good question. Security, cybersecurity starts with the supply chain management. If your project is hosted on a platform that you don't trust, that is strange. I fully agree with you. What can you do? Perhaps you can have a separate mirror which doesn't, well, it looks like this. There are two repositories and you make a separate push there. There is a push to one repository, push to the other repository, and you can make different. If GitHub gives you the right code and substitutes it for your users, I don't know the answer. Good question, anyway. So that's all. Thank you.